Take a journey on the Silk Road, Marco Polo's ancient route to China. Produced at a cost of $50 million and requiring over 10 years to produce, the Silk Road video collection is comprised of separate adventures linking ancient and modern-day Asia. Broadcast to outstanding critical acclaim in over 25 countries, the Silk Road is now available on video for the first time. With the entrancing music of Guitarro as a backdrop, each of the episodes in the collection focuses on the history, art, and culture of one of the world's most inaccessible regions.
The Silk Road begins in Chang'an. To the west lie Persia and Rome, and to the south, India. If you continue eastwards, you eventually come to Korea and Japan. The Silk Road ends in Chang'an as well, the place people came to for silk and for Eastern culture. Already more than 2,000 years ago, Chang'an was a center of exchange between East and West. Our Silk Road expedition was a joint effort made up of people from NHK, the Japan Broadcasting Corporation, and from CCTV, China Central Television. The expedition started from Chang'an, the city which is today called Xi'an. It was the beginning of a journey that would take us across the Yellow River, through the Taklamakan Desert, and towards Pamir. It's the world's last unexplored region, the Silk Road. The bell tower near the center of Xi'an is a sort of symbol of the entire city. This was the center of Chang'an, which was the capital of China during the Han and Tang dynasties, and which flourished as the terminus of the Silk Road. During the Tang dynasty, Chang'an was a splendid city, about 9 kilometers or 5 miles square. It was about twice the size of the present city of Xi'an. The Tang Imperial Palace stood where the bell tower now stands, a very impressive building centered on the Imperial Council Hall. Directly in front of the Council Hall lay a great avenue, 150 meters wide or 500 feet, called Tu Chua Avenue. This was the city's main thoroughfare, and other streets branched at right angles from it, forming square city blocks, like a chessboard. In the eastern part of the city were marvelous buildings, such as the Qin Palace of the Emperor Xuanzong. And merchants came to Chang'an from all over the world. Merchants from the east congregated in what was called the Eastern Market, and those from the west in the Western Market. Here, foreign traders could find lodging houses and take part in the city's thriving business. And leading westwards from Chang'an was the Great Silk Road. Whenever we think of China, we think of the Great Wall. And whenever we think of the Great Wall, our thoughts turn to the Emperor Qi Huangdi, who started to build it. He quelled the tribal strife that divided China, united it for the first time into a single empire, and with a Great Wall, protected it from its nomadic enemies in the north. He was a notorious despot, but he achieved many great things. A marvelous relic that demonstrates the enormous power of the Emperor Qi Huangdi was recently discovered quite near Xi'an. A huge group of clay models of warriors and their horses has been excavated. It's become known as the Emperor Qi Huangdi's sculptured army. The clay army was discovered after it had been in the ground for 2,200 years. Since it was first unearthed in 1974, no foreigners have been allowed to film it or take any pictures. The joint Chinese-Japanese expedition was the first television team allowed to cover the sculptured army, the greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century. During the years since the discovery was first made, more than 600 life-sized figures of soldiers and horses have been found. But they have only excavated about 1/10 of the whole area. When they've all been uncovered, it's expected there'll be more than 6,000 figures. The Emperor Qi Huangdi was indeed a very powerful man. He once said, "I am the Emperor Qin, and my name will be passed down to the second, the third, and even to the 10,000th generation." He even wanted to conquer the world which comes after death. He built a sort of tomb palace underground where he'd live after his death and place soldiers at its four corners like an imperial guard. Today, this is all being carefully excavated by the archaeologists. The clay statues which are now appearing are the men of that imperial guard. In the famous Chinese history book called the Chronicles, the underground palace is described like this. When the Emperor Qi Huangdi took power, he had a tomb constructed using 700,000 convicts as labor. In it, he placed a golden throne and an observation tower with 100 officials and military officers. He had a special system invented that would shoot arrows to kill anyone that might try to dig up the palace. But the reign of this great tyrant, who boasted that his name would be passed down for centuries, only lasted for a brief 15 years. Yet today, after more than 2,000 years, his underground palace is being seen again. So in a way, his boast is coming true. The archaeologist in charge told us that to complete the excavation will take about another 20 years of work. He invited us to come back in the year 2000 and told us we'd be welcome. About 60 kilometers, or 40 miles west of Xi'an, there's a group of what look like small hills. It's the tombs of emperors of the Han dynasty, which ruled China after the Qin about 2,000 years ago. Government officials, important soldiers, and relatives of the emperor were also buried here. The high mound in the middle, surrounded by the tombs of scholars and generals, is the burial place of the great Han emperor, Wu Di. It's about 46 meters high, or 150 feet, and about 230 meters wide at the base, or 250 yards. So it's comparable with the Great Pyramid of Egypt. The Emperor Wu Di was master of China, and to help him conquer the Xiongnu to the north, probably the ancestors of the Huns, he decided he ought to make a military alliance with a country to the west called Yuezhi. He called for a volunteer to carry his message to Yuezhi. The man who came forward was called Jiang Qian. Jiang Qian set out towards the west with a guide called Gan Fu and about 100 companions. We went to see the tomb of Jiang Qian, which still exists at a place called Hanjiang, about 12 hours by train from Xi'an. We were the first expedition of foreigners ever to visit the tomb. Jiang Qian's mission ended in failure, for the emperor of Yuezhi had no interest in an alliance with China. Jiang's journey took him 13 years, and he was twice taken prisoner by the Huns. All of his followers were lost, and when he finally returned to Chang'an, he only had Gan Fu with him, and they were both in a miserable state. But Jiang Qian hadn't wasted his time. As soon as he was granted an audience with the Emperor Wu Di, he told him, "They have marvelous horses in the western lands which gallop as though they were flying, and which sweat drops of blood. They're descended from what are called heavenly horses." The Emperor Wu Di was fascinated at the description of these wonderful horses. For during his battles with the Huns, he had found that he was always at a disadvantage, because the Chinese horses were slower, smaller, and altogether less efficient than the nomads' mounts. This is the Maoling Museum, near the tomb of the Emperor Wu Di. Here we saw statues of Huns being trampled underfoot by Chinese on the horses that sweat blood. Their hands grasp the air uselessly, and the horse whinnies triumphantly. After he had obtained some of the famous Western horses, the Emperor Wu Di organized a campaign against the Xiongnu. His army was commanded by a young general called Puo Jiubing. Handling his new cavalry skillfully, young General Puo fought and won battle after battle with the mounted armies of the Xiongnu. He went on to conquer an area west of the Yellow River called the Hexi Corridor, and returned in triumph to Chang'an with no less than 100,000 prisoners. Fortresses were built in the Hexi Corridor, and a road between Han China and the West was established. Thus, the Silk Road began. For China, the new road had a double importance. From the West, they could get the precious heavenly horses, and they could export Chinese goods and culture abroad, especially silk. "50 miles west of Xi'an lies the largest tomb in China, perhaps the largest tomb in the world. It's the burial place of the third emperor of the Tang dynasty, which started in 618 AD. His name was Gao Zhong, and his empress who was buried with him was called Wu Zetian. Wu Zetian, who ruled alone for 50 years after the death of her husband, was the only empress in the entire history of China. During her reign, China flourished, and its capital, Chang'an, became the biggest and busiest city in the world, with a population of more than 1 million people. The Tang dynasty was the greatest dynasty in all China's history, the flower of the dynasties. The capital, Chang'an, was a veritable peony blossom, and the empress Wu Zetian was like the queen bee among its petals. This tomb, called Qianling, was built into a mountain 1,048 meters high, or 3,000 feet, and it represents a peak in China's history. Soon they'll start to excavate it properly. On the road to the tomb are many stone figures who look like servants waiting to serve a master. These 10 figures are each 4.5 meters tall, or 15 feet, and they represent well-known military and civilian officials who served the Emperor Gaozong. They're realistically carved, and they're believed to have been sculptured from life. There are also figures of animals such as lions standing guard. The winged figures are typical of the style of the Western lands. These are figures of the foreign ambassadors who attended the funeral of Gao Zhong and who even helped to build the tomb. Altogether, 61 kings, members of royal families, or ambassadors from different countries attended the funeral. These clothes, with tight sleeves and a wide hem, are from the north, so you can see it's a group of foreigners. They're wearing belts and have swords slung at the side, but they're holding their hands in front of their chests in Chinese style. At one time, you could read which country they came from and their rank written on the back of each figure, but the characters wore away long ago. But why have the hands and heads been removed? This is still a puzzle. That great funeral, held almost 1,300 years ago, and yet attended by representatives of 61 countries, shows how important China and its capital of Chang'an were in those days. Silk is one of the most important features of Chinese civilization, and its culture is believed to have started more than 3,000 years ago. Several hundred years later, there were already characters in the written language for mulberry, thread, and silk. Silk soon became famous as one of the most marvelous products of China. This is the tomb of Princess Yong Tai, near the Quanling Mound. As you pass along the underground passage, 90 meters long or 82 yards, you can see pictures of ladies of the Tang court painted on both walls. The silk that drapes these ladies was described by a poet of the Tang dynasty. He said, "Silk is a heavenly thing, with threads like geese flying through the autumn sky. Its color is like spring reflected in a lake." These ladies are playing with flowers in a garden. Another poet wrote about the mistress of a Tang emperor. Her smile brings 100 charms to her eyes, and her beauty has the fragrance of the 6 shrines. When she bathes in the pond, her servants are struck dumb by her beauty. "3,000 lovely maidens serve the emperor, but he has eyes for only her." Adoringly, he says, "In the air, as birds, we'd share one pair of wings. Here below, as trees, our branches intertwine." This wall dates only from the Ming dynasty, but 700 or 800 years before it was built, the Tang city was 8 times as big and measured 10 kilometers by 8 kilometers, or 6 miles by 5 miles. It was the biggest city in the world, bigger even than Baghdad in the west. Inside the city walls were markets, where business was done by traders from all over the world. The Western market was the place where the merchants of the Silk Road gathered to buy and sell. The Western market had other attractions, including music. Entertainment was provided by the hospitable Chinese for the merchants who had endured the hardships of the Silk Road. Merchants from Rome, from Persia, and from Central Asia all gathered at the Western market. Above all else, what they wanted to buy was silk. In Imperial Rome, silk was worth literally its weight in gold. Objects that show how international Chang'an was have often been excavated in Xi'an. Figures made of the Tang soft ceramic show people from many countries. They've even found ancient Japanese coins. Driving these camels are people from the north with their high boots. Cultural exchange was flourishing, and a new Silk Road culture was beginning. Along the road, in both directions, camels were traveling, carrying civilization to the east and to the west. This silken artificial flower was found at an important town on the Silk Road called Turfan, about 1,500 kilometers west of Chang'an, or 900 miles. According to the Chinese archaeologists, it's about 1,500 years old, but because Turfan is such a dry place, it's been perfectly preserved. Here a wolf is attacking a traveler on the Silk Road. The Taklamakan Desert, where this was found, is known as a place where the only milestones are the whitened bones of the dead. But still, people succeeded in walking across it, and silk arrived in Rome. This is an oasis on the southern route of the Silk Road, through a country called He Tan. Here, the British explorer Stein discovered a famous painting. In He Tien, they had no silkworms, so the king asked his bride, a Chinese princess, to bring some cocoons with her when she came to marry him. The export of silkworms was forbidden, of course, but the princess succeeded in smuggling a few through. Here you can see one of the princess's ladies-in-waiting pointing to her crown. That's where she hid the cocoons. Eventually, the silk crossed the mountains of Pamir, the deserts of Arabia, and arrived in distant Rome. To the Romans, China was Ceres, the country of silk. The city of Xi'an is in China's Shanxi province. It has a population of 2.5 million, about twice as many as in ancient Chang'an. Its name was changed from Chang'an to Xi'an in 1928. We wanted to see what was left in today's city of ancient Chang'an, the capital of 11 Chinese emperors long ago. We were looking especially for evidence of the cosmopolitan culture that came to Chang'an in exchange for its precious silk. When we visited Xi'an, it was autumn. The city was bustling with celebrations for the 30th anniversary of the founding of modern China. On the street corners, they were selling watermelons. In Chinese and in Japanese too, the characters for watermelon mean Western melon. The watermelon was brought from the west along the Silk Road. It's said that pomegranates too first came here from Persia. Many other fruits and vegetables have the character for xiongnu in their names, including cucumbers, walnuts, sesame, broad beans, garlic, and carrots. They all tell the story of travel along the Silk Road. All kinds of new entertainments were also brought for the people of Chang'an. Here's a picture of a polo match that was painted in the Tang dynasty. Polo, which originally comes from Persia, was the favorite game of the Emperor Xuanzong and was very popular among the aristocrats of Chang'an. Polo, which came to China from the West more than 1,000 years ago, is still today enjoyed by the young men of Mongolia. People traveling along the Silk Road also brought their religions with them. The Nestorian sect of Christianity is said to have come to Chang'an in the year 635, and the Chinese called it Jingjiao. Jingjiao spread quickly in Chang'an, and this great memorial was set up to record its arrival. The names of the believers are written both in Chinese characters and in Syrian writing, evidence of how international Chang'an was. While we were in Xi'an in 1979, Islam was big news all over the world. But Islam has been here for many years. We visited the famous mosque called Qingjiansu. We only took pictures from behind, as the Muslims don't like to be photographed praying. Muslims face Mecca 5 times every day in prayer. They wash themselves with water every time they pray. Twice a year, Qingjiansu is filled with Muslims attending annual festivals. During the Tang dynasty, it's recorded that the city had 1,000 Muslims. Today, there are more than 10 times as many. Here we are with some new foreign friends from China, Algeria, and Syria.
Syria, Algeria, Sydney, Japan.
But nothing influenced China as much as another religion that arrived on the Silk Road, Buddhism. We visited the Xingjiao Tzu, which is where a famous Buddhist priest of the 7th century is buried. His name was San Zhang, and he wrote a famous book called Xi Yo Ji, or A Journey to the West. The Tang Emperor Gao Zhong grieved when San Zhang died and said that China had lost a national treasure. For the past 1,300 years, this Xinjiaosu has been China's main Buddhist temple. His main claim to fame is that he traveled all the way to India. In those days, it must have seemed like the end of the earth, to bring back Buddhist scriptures. From the time he left Chang'an until he returned, the entire journey of 25,000 kilometers or 15,000 miles took him no less than 16 years. He brought back 657 rolls of Buddhist sutras from India, and it took 24 horses to carry them all. As soon as he'd returned to China, he started the immense job of translating them all into Chinese. The influence San Zhan's journey had on China is incalculable, and what he accomplished, he did as a pioneer on the Silk Road. The chief priest of the Xinjiaozu invited us upstairs, saying he had something interesting to show us.
Oh.
Many Buddhist documents are preserved here, as you would expect. And although there's no proof that these are the actual sutras that San Zhang brought back, the head priest handled them with great reverence.
これは随分古いもののようですが、一体何でしょうかね。
这个东西这么旧了，这什么东西啊？
北野经。
叫白药経と言います。
白药経。
白藥経。
白药経ってのは何ですか？
什么叫北野经啊？
这是印度的北野树的树叶。
これはですね、インドのある白葉という木の葉っぱです。
葉っぱ。随分古いもののようですが、何書いてあるんですかね。これいつの時代のもんでしょうね。
这么旧了，上面写的什么呀？这是不是很古了？
就是古了，是唐代玄奘法师由印度出来的梵文。
そうです。これはね、随分古いものです。唐の時代ですね。唐の時代、銀龍法師がお経を取るとき、これをインドから取ってきた言文です。
言語。文
語です。
文語
です。違いました。どうもすみません。
これそうすると素晴らしい宝。
Even in communist China, these items of Buddhist culture brought from the West are protected and preserved. Xi'an is a transit point on the modern Silk Road that starts from Shanghai, the gateway to the ocean, and runs to Urumqi, the international city in the inner continent. The people today who leave from Xi'an travel the distance of about 2,000 kilometers, or 1,300 miles, in 2 days and 2 nights. The river Weishui flows through the northwestern suburbs of Xi'an. When people set off westwards along the Silk Road, this is where their friends and relations would see them off. They held farewell parties in the inns, many of which lay along the riverbanks. There used to be a custom of breaking off a twig from one of the willow trees that grew along the river and giving it to the departing traveler. They used to bend the twig into a circular shape as a kind of prayer for a safe return. Many great works of Chinese literature have been written about the pain of parting at the beginning of the Silk Road, but none more famous than the words of the Tang poet Wang Wei. The traveler's willow tokens are fresh and green, and I offer you a toast, for you are departing towards the setting sun, and soon you will be a part of the past. We bade farewell to our hosts in Xi'an and departed across the river for Donghuang, for the Taklamakan Desert, and for lands unknown.
Take a journey on the Silk Road, Marco Polo's ancient route to China. Produced at a cost of $50 million and requiring over 10 years to produce, the Silk Road video collection is comprised of separate adventures linking ancient and modern-day Asia. Broadcast to outstanding critical acclaim in over 25 countries, the Silk Road is now available on video for the first time. With the entrancing music of Guitarro as a backdrop, each of the episodes in the collection focuses on the history, art, and culture of one of the world's most inaccessible regions. In the glories of ancient Chang'an, you'll visit the starting point of the Silk Road, Chang'an, the world's largest city in the 7th century. You'll see the incredible clay army, buried for almost 2,000 years. The discovery of these 6,000 statues was an archaeological triumph, and the Silk Road crew were the first foreigners allowed to photograph it. Thrill at the sculptures deep in the world's largest tomb, and then enter China's most hallowed Buddhist temple. Examine the hidden underground murals of a legendary princess, and walk the only man-made object visible from outer space, the Great Wall of China. In 1,000 kilometers beyond the Yellow River, you'll cross the Yellow River in a goatskin raft. Gaze in awe at the same giant Buddha that Marco Polo saw 700 years ago. Look with amazement at the huge water wheels that irrigate miles of Chinese croplands, and visit the secret caves of Bingli Sea, never before photographed by a television crew. Then transverse the forbidden corridor between the mountains and the Gobi Desert, where the Huns battled the Chinese for control over the most prized horses in the world. In the art gallery in the desert, you'll tour the legendary Magao Caves at Dunhuang, over 500 caves filled with more than 3,000 murals and statues, dating back to the 4th century AD, an oasis of history located in the middle of the Gobi Desert. These incredible man-made caves are an architectural masterpiece and the dream of art scholars around the world. Now, you will be among the first Westerners to visit them, and you'll see for yourself why these artifacts are considered to be among the most priceless treasures on Earth. In the Dark Castle, you'll encounter a mysterious ghost castle situated in the Gobi Desert. These ruins are all that remain after Genghis Khan obliterated the legendary city of Karakoto and exterminated the people that built it. After the Russian explorer Kozlov unearthed the castle, he took its incomparable treasures to the Russian art museum, the Hermitage. The castle, believed by the Chinese to be cursed, has not been entered for over 50 years until now. The castle stands near the Russian-Chinese border and is in a sensitive military zone normally closed to anyone but the Chinese army. You can only visit this region today via the Silk Road. The journey continues in search of the lost kingdom of Lulan, where you'll discover a lost kingdom which vanished into the sands of the desert. Join the first journey in half a century to seek these ruins. You'll uncover Silk Road relics that have been buried for over a millennium, and you'll unearth a mummy that's been preserved in a secret grave for over 2,000 years. The wind-carved rocks of the desert surround you at every turn. You'll gaze in amazement at the beauty that has taken nature and eternity to create. In across the Taklamakan Desert, you'll be the first foreign visitors in over 75 years to visit the ancient Buddhist city of Meran. Visit the beautiful home of a Chinese farmer and his family, and the gardens and vineyards that surround their land. Meet nomads in an oasis town, and be delighted as the village children sing and dance for you. You'll then attempt to cross the desert described by the locals as the place from which nothing living returns. After losing your way in the 120-degree heat, your caravan will stumble into ancient ruins and then attempt a night escape across the desert to safety. The Silk Road is an opportunity to travel through Asia as never before possible. Experience a voyage into the past by visiting the present. Examine the art, thrill to the scenery, and enjoy the hospitality of the people of these far-off regions. Your copy of the Silk Road will be your passport to an unforgettable journey.